a hypothetical account of perpetrator's mindset leading up to his alleged hate crime. This fictional account illustrates how isolation, ideological manipulation, and personal failure can coalesce into violent extremism. Colored isn't portrayed as purely evil, but as someone who surrendered to a simplistic worldview where blame replaced healing. His transformation didn't happen overnight, it was gradual, subtle, and fueled by a desperate search for purpose in a country who had revoked his visa, rejected him as not good enough after struggling to fit into America for most of his 45 years of life. Earlier that fateful day that would most likely end in a cold, grey, lightless cell, Khalid Mansur stared out the single square window of his small apartment. Blinds drawn from trembling fingers. Slightly, he tightened the laces of his boots. In the corner sat a pile of newspaper stories of violence, of displacement, of destruction in America, stories of Russia and Ukraine, of a rogue war, not the just war he had waged upon those who turned on him, coldly rejecting his presence. But he felt a sense of kinship with the Russian soldiers in his newspaper. Each headline seemed to confirm what he'd come to believe. The world had turned its back on people like him, but Khalid hadn't always been this way. Years ago, he arrived with hope, a visa, a work permit, a second chance. Colorado's wide skies had welcomed him, but the warmth of the sun never reached inside. He felt like a ghost walking through Boulder's streets, tolerated, but never embraced. His accent drew stares. His prayers, inspiring to his life purpose, now drew dark suspicion from spying eyes and cowardly glances at his grim expressions. Eyes narrowed in a sense of duty, lips pressed tight with a soldier's iron resolve, preparing for death. Lise Mohammed dishonored him for becoming faint in his conviction to hurt, maim, and kill the blasphemers who had seen to his expulsion from a land he had raised his family within. Slowly, bitterness grew like rust on his soul. At first, it was just online videos, commentators claiming truths he'd never heard before, then forums, then encrypted chats. "You're not alone," they said. "You see the lies," they promised. They told him history had been twisted, that the people he resented were not victims but oppressors. With every post he read, Khalid's world became more black and white. He didn't see individuals anymore, only enemies and allies. In the echo chamber, rage felt like righteousness. Page 2. He stopped going out, except when necessary. His job at the warehouse became background noise. At night, he replayed the same speeches over and over, talks about betrayal, about cultural extinction, about justice through fire. He convinced himself he wasn't angry, he was awakened. Every frustration in his life, his isolation, his failure to build a future, his lack of purpose suddenly had a target. That day, Khalid watched footage of a local rally. People singing in Hebrew, waving flags he had come to despise. A celebration, they called it. In his warped mind, it felt like a provocation. They flaunt their victories, he thought, and no one speaks for the sun. By the time he acted, his humanity was buried beneath layers of ideology and so. In his mind, he was no longer a man committing violence. He was a soldier in a holy war, a messenger of vengeance. He justified the horror as symbolic, as necessary. He didn't see the fear in the eyes of the 16 people he had firebombed. They were not human, a myth he had created in his head. And as sirens approached, as officers rushed towards him with guns drawn, the adrenaline wore off, and part of Khalid's fog of insanity cleared. He did not drop to his knees in guilt or empathy from those he had burned. Many heard crying in shock and pain in the distance. In Khalid's apathetic mind, he experienced a childlike daze of confusion. Why didn't the fire I spread fix anything? He wondered. Why do I still feel empty?